Robert Starbard, Tribal Administrator, Hoonah Indian Association.
Mr. Chairman, thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today, the ranking member and members of this committee, to testify on H.R. 3110, the Hoonah Tlingit Traditional Gull Egg Use Act. I'm Robert Starbard, the Tribal Administrator for the federally recognized tribe Hoonah Indian Association. I am a Hoonah Tlingit and a member of the Hoonah Kau, as we refer to ourselves as a people. I'm here to represent our views to this committee on this legislation that provides for the restoration of an important cultural tradition and connection to our traditional ancestral homelands, now known as the Glacier Bay National Park and Preserve. The oral histories of the Hoonah Tlingit people describe the occupation of our ancestral lands using the term "since time immemorial," for referring to our continuous occupation and use of land from prehistory to present. Since time immemorial, the collection of gull eggs on South Marble Island and elsewhere in Glacier Bay has been a traditional cultural practice of the Tlingit people. The Hoonah continued to harvest gull eggs in Glacier Bay long after the park was established in 1925. Egg collection was not curtailed until the 1960s with the passage of the Migratory Bird Treaty Act and the National Park Service regulations, which then prohibited the activity in the bay. The Migratory Bird Treaty Act failed to provide for the traditional harvest of migratory birds and their eggs, so in 1997, Congress ratified a treaty amendment authorizing the traditional subsistence harvest of migratory bird eggs in Alaska by permanent residents of designated villages, regardless of race. These traditional subsistence harvests are regulated by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. The Hoonah Indian Association obtained qualified community status from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, allowing for the collection of gull eggs in designated harvest areas of the national forest. However, these regulations do not apply to Glacier Bay, and it has remained closed to all taking of wildlife, including those subsistence harvests of gull eggs. The Glacier Bay National Park Resource Management Act of 2000 directed the National Park Service to study whether gull eggs collection could resume without impairing the biological sustainability of the gull population in the park. The August 2010 Record of Decision found that collection under certain conditions would be sustainable. The National Park Service has gone on record as supporting this legislation, along with an amendment that would clarify the role of the tribe as being merely advisory. We must respectfully decline to concur with that amendment. In November 2000, President Bush issued Executive Order 13175, Consultation and Coordination with Indian Tribal Governments, which states, when undertaking to formulate and implement policies that have tribal implications, agencies shall encourage Indian tribes to develop their own policies to achieve program objectives. Where possible, defer to Indian tribes to establish standards, and in determining whether to establish federal standards, consult with tribal officials as to the need for federal standards and any alternatives that would limit the scope of federal standards or otherwise preserve the prerogatives and authority of Indian tribes. We firmly believe working cooperatively and collaboratively with the National Park Service and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service that we as a tribe are fully capable of developing policies and standards necessary to achieve the sustainable harvest in compliance with the objectives of this legislation and the recommendations of the Legislative Environmental Impact Statement. In closing, I would paraphrase from the 2003 paper titled Hoonah Tlingit Traditional Environmental Knowledge, Conservation, and the Management of a Wilderness Park. The traditional gull egg harvest practices of the Hoonah Tlingit are an example of indigenous resource management that might be judged conservationist, with the proviso that what is being conserved is not biodiversity in the abstract, but a living community that requires, as a condition of its continued existence, the sustainable management of the resources on which it depends. Mr. Chairman, I appreciate the opportunity to testify on this matter, and I'll gladly answer any questions.